This story begins with a gang of hoodlums being led by a single individual, claiming that they were about to confront a child, but not just any child. As he explained this, the gang leader would appear. The boy giving the speech would thank the boss for arriving, saying that with him there, they would have a chance to win. This would annoy the boss as he thought it was too much trouble for just a little child. Two policemen hidden nearby were observing everything, ready to witness the fight that seemed about to begin. At that moment, the silhouette of someone approaching from the street would be seen, and the gang member would shout, calling out the name, Baki. It turned out that Baki was just a 13-year-old boy who was about to face a group of 100 bandits alongside their leader. But without saying a word, Baki launched himself at the leader, knocking him out with a few punches, and then proceeded to take down the next one. This surprised everyone present, both the gang members and the police. The fight would then begin, with Baki gaining a clear advantage. The policeman would explain that Baki knew that even though they were 100, only 4 of them could fight him at the same time, and Baki would take advantage of this by making them hit each other. However, Baki would start to be overwhelmed by these gangsters. But then he would start to have memories of a red-haired person killing bats with his bare hands inside a cave. This would motivate him and make him continue to strike these individuals, who started beating up Baki after knocking him down with chains. Nevertheless, Baki would manage to free himself from this beating and run towards some bars, where he would prepare to continue the fight, successfully knocking out several of these gang members. But in the end, there were too many, and they overwhelmed Baki, starting another beating. Seeing that things were getting ugly for Baki, one of the observing policemen decided to intervene, causing the gang members to flee. When the policeman tried to wake up Baki, he received a kick from our protagonist. However, he didn't mind and told Baki that considering he fought against 100 gangsters, it was quite an achievement that he managed to take down 37 of them. However, this number disappointed Baki, who had aimed to take down at least 50 of them. Afterward, the police accompanied Baki home, where they saw the path filled with graffiti insulting him. The partner asked what all this was about, and Kido replied that the weak, knowing they could never defeat Baki in a fight, decided to do such things. The next day, Baki trained in a special laboratory but realized that the training wouldn't make him as strong as his father. He decided to destroy everything and find a new way to become stronger. After this, someone reported what had happened to a woman who turned out to be Emi Akezawa, Baki's mother. Returning to the protagonist, while thinking in the park about how to become stronger, a professional fighter named Yuri Tchaikovsky passed by his side. Meanwhile, elsewhere, one of Baki's mother's henchmen would have a conversation with an old man in search of a strong individual for Baki to fight, and they ended up talking about Yuujirou Hanma. Baki, on the other hand, would arrive at a gym where Yuri was training. Seeing how Yuri beat up one of the boxers there, Baki decided to challenge him himself, which Yuri accepted because he respected Baki's desire to fight. Baki put up a good fight, but after Yuri had a flashback of his past, where he fought off a pack of wolves to defend his sister, he defeated Baki. Meanwhile, one of Baki's mother's henchmen would be talking to the mafia boss, Yuujirou Hanma, whom they had sought out to fight against Baki. Hanma wasn't interested, but then the henchman would mention the name Yuujirou Hanma, catching the attention of the mafia leader. Back to Baki, he would wake up after being knocked out by Yuri in that defeat, crying because it was Baki's first loss. After experiencing his first defeat in his life, Baki would run home in tears. Back at his home, while having a conversation with the police officer, Baki's mother would arrive, scolding him for his behavior at the gym. Instead, she would give Baki a French kiss, surprising the policeman. The next day, Baki decides that he needs to follow in his father's footsteps, so he heads to the mountains to start the same training his father went through. He is then greeted by Ando, a longtime friend of the Hanma family, who initially threatens to eat Baki but invites him to his home to eat raw meat once he recognizes him. Ando offers to train Baki since he is also very strong, but Baki rejects the offer, saying that he had come to that place to search for a creature known as Yasha. Ando tells him that it's crazy, that this creature measures over 5 meters and is over 150 years old, capable of tearing apart a bear as if it were nothing. Furthermore, it is said that there is more than one of them, but many years ago, one of them was destroyed by Yuujirou Hanma. In the end, Ando offers Baki an axe in case he encounters the beast, but he rejects this weapon, saying that he wanted to take the beast's life with his own hands. At night, Baki was training at the entrance of a cave where this monster was supposed to be, and upon seeing it face to face, Baki begins to experience great fear, becoming completely frozen and at the mercy of Yasha. Luckily for our protagonist, Ando appears and throws his axe at the monster to help him, but Yasha bites his arm and breaks his stomach with his own hands, leaving him with severe injuries. Baki throws fire at this monster to save his friend's life, managing to scare the monster away. Due to his injuries, they had to take Ando to the hospital. With the help of Baki's mother, a helicopter arrives ready to take Ando to the hospital. After this, Baki understands that to become stronger, he must leave all his fears behind. He starts training, pushing his body to the extreme, eating large amounts and engaging in intense and rigorous training, releasing a large amount of endorphins. Realizing that his training has reached its limit, Baki decides that as a final test, he will throw himself off a cliff into the void, believing that this will finally free him from his fears and make him stop being weak. At first, this plan doesn't work, and Baki starts crashing into rocks. But halfway through the fall, his body starts moving on its own, managing to maneuver in a way that allows him to safely reach the bottom of the cliff. Having achieved this, our protagonist feels prepared to face the Yasha monster again, and they engage in a fierce battle. In the midst of it all, Ando appears. After being discharged from the hospital, he rushes to help Baki, but when he brings our protagonist a message, Baki tells him not to interfere. Between the exchange of blows between Baki and the monster, our protagonist finally manages to knock it down, surprising Ando. The monster, on the other hand, accepts defeat and leaves the arena. The next day, our protagonist meditates on what happened, realizing that what he did was wrong. He had bothered and attacked an innocent animal that only wanted to protect its home, and Baki had gone to attack it with the sole purpose of becoming stronger. In the end, our protagonist realizes that what he did was wrong, and from this day on, he decides that he will not harm another living being unless they deserve it. With Ando's help, Baki manages to reach the Yasha's cave, and they repeat the story of how Yuujirou had killed one of the Yashas several years ago. This Yasha happened to be the wife of the one Baki faced, and that's why he decides to return the Yasha's skull. Upon seeing that the Yasha finally managed to complete the skeleton of his deceased wife, with tears and on his knees, he apologizes to Baki for everything his father did to him while thanking him because thanks to him, he has become not only wiser but also stronger. The ape gives Baki one of its teeth that he had lost during the fight, and then Baki leaves completely satisfied, having learned a lot on this journey, as he is watched by the Yasha, who is surrounded by his 3 young children. Afterward, Baki goes to his mother's house, where she shows him the recent fight of Yuri Tchaikovsky for the middleweight championship. She tries to bribe him with 100 million yen to fight her son, but money doesn't interest him, so he rejects the offer. After winning, Yuri also wants to win the heavyweight division. To achieve this, he gains 15 kilograms in 2 months, but Baki doesn't like it at all. He says that the old Yuri Tchaikovsky was much faster and more dangerous. After this, he goes to the gym where Yuri Tchaikovsky is training and tells him that he considers boxing an imperfect sport and, furthermore, doesn't consider it a martial art. Despite this, he says that he respects him a lot and will support him until the end. These words deeply hurt both Yuri and others in the room, so everyone agrees to show Baki how hard the boxers hit the punching bags, but Baki would then destroy the punching bag with a single blow, demonstrating that at 13 years old, he was the strongest in that room. The day arrives for Yuri Tchaikovsky to fight for the heavyweight championship, but before entering the ring, his team would be attacked by Hanayama. They start fighting, but the 15-year-old mafia boss easily withstands all the blows from this professional boxer. And in a careless moment, Hanayama manages to grab Yuri Tchaikovsky's hand and, using his other hand, starts squeezing the joints with such brute force that his tendons and veins burst. But despite those injuries, Yuri Tchaikovsky continues fighting, as he is a knight, and it is customary for them to fight until the end. However, Hanayama easily finishes him off, causing Yuri Tchaikovsky to be taken to the hospital. Upon learning of this, Baki goes in search of the mobster, managing to overpower all the guards until he reaches Hanayama. He then kicks his desk out of the window, causing Hanayama to stand up. But with a kick, Baki puts the mafia boss on his knees, something that no one had achieved until that moment, surprising everyone present, including Hanayama himself. However, their battle would be interrupted by the police, who arrived at the scene due to a call. Baki said he was ready to fight at any time. Such insolence and humiliation would enrage Hanayama, who would take it out on his car, destroying it and tearing it apart with his bare hands. In a hospital, Yuri's manager would go to insult him for the beating he received from Hanayama and would start harassing his sister. But at that moment, our protagonist would arrive to save him and put the manager in his place, kicking him out of the room. After this, Baki and Yuri would have a conversation about what it means to be a warrior and how Yuri's career had come to an end. But in the end, they end the conversation on good terms. On the other hand, Hanayama would visit an elderly woman who appeared to be very old but was actually his mother, who was suffering from a disease that had left her in that condition. Going back to Baki and Yuri, our protagonist tells us that although his legs tremble, it is not out of fear but because he is eager to face the mafia leader again, and he eagerly awaits their next encounter. Baki knows that the mafia boss can attack him at any time and place, so he is always on the lookout, and finally, that's what Hanayama does at the mall. Due to the element of surprise, he manages to hit Baki several times, and to eliminate him definitively, he throws him out the window into the void. But thanks to some convenient cables near the window, Baki manages to grab onto them and return to the fight, where the mafia leader grabs his arm to try to do the same thing he did to Yuri. But he fails as our protagonist manages to free himself and land several blows on Kaoru, who then decides to fight seriously, showing everyone the tattoo on his back that symbolizes the story of a wanderer who sacrificed his life to save a son of an important clan. While Kaoru and Baki exchange blows, it is told how Kaoru, in order to improve his tattoo, single-handedly defeated an entire rival clan, covering his body in scars. Then Kaoru Hanayama manages to grab our protagonist's arm for a second time, but Baki unconsciously makes the exact movements to knock down the giant. Baki feels like he has won, but at that moment, he is struck by Hanayama, crashing him into the wall. After this blow, when it seemed that everything was over, Hanayama falls exhausted to the ground. At that moment, Baki gathers his last strength and approaches the mafia boss. They recognize each other and express gratitude for the fight. Suddenly and surprisingly, Yuujirou Hanma himself bursts into the place, falling from the sky, the one Hanayama dreamed of fighting. However, the difference in strength is too great, and without much effort, Yuujirou easily knocks out both Hanayama and Baki. However, it is clarified that despite being tired from the fight, even if they had been at their 100%, neither had any chance anyway. After this, the ogre addresses Akezawa, scolding her for not being able to turn Baki into a great fighter in these 3 years, and that her job was to turn him into a great fighter so that they could have a deathmatch. Here, it is told how Baki's parents met. It turns out that Baki's mother was the girlfriend of an important businessman, and they were both already married. But there, she would meet Yuujirou, whom she couldn't take her eyes off of. And suddenly, Yuujirou lunges forward to kiss her in front of everyone, and after killing anyone who gets in his way, he ends up staying with Emi Akezawa. In the present, Emi and Baki are talking, and she can't stop talking about how incredible Yuujirou is, which annoys Baki. He then receives a note from Hanayama, who calls him to meet at the hospital. There, we see that Hanayama, after the fight with Baki and Yuujirou, is left with his arms and legs shattered, and he tells Baki that he hopes he becomes someone strong enough to defeat Yuujirou. Meanwhile, Yuujirou is in the forest, where he had killed the Yasha, and then brings its head to traumatize the poor boy, all with the goal of generating hatred in him so that they can fight in 1 month. Baki, in a sign of sadness over the Yasha's death, begins to eat the tooth that it had given him as a gift. After this, while mourning the loss of his friend, a military man named Stridium appears behind him. He turns out to be a friend of Yuujirou Hanma and advises Baki that if he truly wants to become stronger to face Yuujirou, he needs to train with even stronger opponents. Capturing Baki's attention, Stridium tells our protagonist about a group of mercenaries in Hokkaido who are known as the most dangerous mercenaries in the world, and supposedly, someone there is capable of rivaling Yuujirou Hanma's power. Stridium then takes Baki in a helicopter to a forest, where he finally throws Baki into this forest full of mercenaries from the helicopter. Luckily, Baki manages to land safely. As Baki observes the surrounding forest, one of the mercenaries suddenly appears without him noticing and manages to capture our protagonist. However, Baki eventually frees himself and confronts one of the mercenaries who uses knives to fight Baki, but it is not enough, and Baki defeats him. To ensure that he doesn't bother our protagonist anymore, Baki buries him in the ground. Another mercenary attacks Baki and tries to suffocate him, but our protagonist manages to trick him and strangle him. The next one is a bald and fearful mercenary whom Baki easily defeats. These mercenaries then warn our protagonist about the most dangerous mercenary in the area, Gaia, and they mention that they know his father, Yuujirou Hanma, as does anyone involved in the world of fighting and war. Baki becomes even more interested in this person when he hears what the mercenaries say about this mercenary who is capable of rivaling the strength of the ogre, Yuujirou Hanma. These twin mercenaries fight with a vast arsenal of weapons hidden in their bodies, as well as cutting cords, putting our protagonist in serious trouble. However, this is not enough, as the son of the ogre, the strongest child in the world, manages to free himself from these cords and once again escapes the mercenaries. Using the same cords with which his enemies had cornered him at first, he defeats the two twins. But suddenly, he realizes that there are no more mercenaries available at that time and place. At that moment, the bald man whom Baki had defeated a few moments ago starts screaming and writhing, while the other mercenaries shout at Baki to escape as quickly as possible. But then, the bald man is released, as he has a dissociative personality disorder, and this alternate personality is called Gaia, the mercenary. The other mercenaries start trembling, as they know that the worst is yet to come. This mercenary Gaia, when experiencing the dissociative personality disorder and sensing danger and imminent death, his personality transforms into a killing machine, calling itself the God of War. This second personality is capable of controlling the flow of adrenaline in his body, allowing him to increase his strength and speed when he deems it necessary. He and his body are one, and with these abilities, he is able to push Baki to the edge, repeatedly striking him against the ground. Despite this, the protagonist gets up time and time again until it seems he has been defeated. But at the last moment, on the brink of death, he survives due to the release of endorphins. The fight continues from there, and Baki is gradually catching up to his opponent, the mercenary Gaia. But even so, it is not enough. All of this is because the mercenary Gaia can easily read the young man's movements due to his accumulated training, extensive experience, and suffering. Gaia points out that Baki has followed the wrong path in his life and shows him that he doesn't need to make his body suffer to reach a new level of strength. He uses himself as an example since the mercenary has the ability to control his adrenaline at will. Then, we are told the story of how several years ago, when Gaia still had hair, he was captured by his enemies and was on the verge of being executed. This experience ultimately gave him a definitive fear of being so close to death. This fear resulted in a significant increase in strength and self-control over his own body, transforming him into the mercenary Gaia, his second personality, which emerges when danger and death are practically imminent. The mercenary Gaia is determined to end this fight once and for all, so he proceeds to fiercely attack the protagonist. However, this doesn't seem to be enough. Suddenly, Baki manages to free his body, apparently thanks to the words of the mercenary Gaia, and now Baki's body moves more freely, delivering strong blows to the mercenary. Seeing this, Gaia realizes that if the fight continues like this, he will lose. Therefore, the mercenary decides to unleash one of his ultimate attacks, a powerful scream that leaves our protagonist completely stunned. At that moment, Baki starts hitting himself to maintain consciousness. And once again, our protagonist manages to free himself from the mercenary's tricks. But in that moment, Gaia, realizing he's in trouble, starts using nature to his advantage, utilizing water, trees, earth, wind, and leaves to try various tricks against Baki until he gets him in a position where Gaia starts suffocating him. However, this is still not enough to subdue Baki, who once again frees himself, telling Gaia that his tricks are cowardly. Then, we are reminded that Baki pledged not to harm others unless necessary, so he developed various techniques filled with compassion to avoid injuring the enemy's body. In this way, he finally defeats the mercenary Gaia. Over time, the mercenaries who were enemies come to understand that fighting among themselves is senseless, and they mutually respect each other, becoming war comrades. Meanwhile, the ogre hears about this feat from the military man who brought Baki to that place. In an unexpected turn of events, the ogre announces that he would go after a powerful politician to kill him and teach his son the true power, effortlessly surpassing all the armed forces protecting the place and reaching the politician, demonstrating that he is perfectly capable of killing him if he so desires and ridiculing all the forces tasked with defending him. Meanwhile, Baki continues with his training and, on his journey, he faces a sword master, managing to win the fight even when unarmed, although he sustains a superficial cut. On the other hand, Yuujirou Hanma meets an old friend who is an expert in Japanese weapons, and the ogre sets out to surpass his best bow and arrow, easily accomplishing it thanks to his superhuman strength, which makes the supposedly best bow and arrow in Japan look ridiculous. One night, Baki's mother tries to make advances toward Yuujirou, but he rejects her, and the ogre scolds her for not turning Baki into the rival Yuujirou expected. According to the ogre, strength isn't everything. Heartbroken, she goes to Baki, who tries to console her, but she only complains about why Yuujirou doesn't love her and starts hitting Baki, asking why he is so weak. Hearing this, Baki tries to comfort his mother, saying that he will be able to hit Yuujirou in their fight and asks her if she could love him when he is capable of doing so. However, she rejects him again and tries to hit him once more. This deeply saddens Baki, and as he walks down a main street, he encounters a group of thugs who start beating him. Due to his sadness, he doesn't defend himself. At that moment, Kaoru Hanayama, the mafia boss, appears and humbly stands next to Baki, and they begin to talk about their problems. After hearing Baki's story, Hanayama tells him that he is envious of him. This comment annoys Baki, but Hanayama explains that his mother is suffering from a terrible illness, and despite being 35 years old, she looks like a 100-year-old woman and he can't even hug her. Both of them decide not to give up, and Hanayama supports Baki in his mission to defeat the wretched ogre. Finally, the long-awaited day arrives, and all of Baki's acquaintances and friends start gathering at the venue to support our protagonist. Wanting to test his new abilities, Baki has a small fight with Yuri, which he easily wins. Then, he faces Hanayama, whom he also defeats effortlessly. However, Gaia is nowhere to be found. Turns out, this mercenary had gone to another location to intercept the ogre, as he wanted to personally verify if the rumors about this monster were true, and that would be the moment when it would be defined who was the strongest of the two. Finally, night falls, and in a helicopter, the ogre arrives along with Gaia, who is completely battered and badly injured after the beating from the ogre. Baki's mother also disembarks from the helicopter. At that moment, to everyone's surprise, an earthquake begins, but to prevent it from interfering in the fight, Yuujirou Hanma stops it with a single blow. The fight begins, and Baki launches himself ferociously to harm the ogre with a powerful barrage of punches, but Yuujirou Hanma seems to be just playing with his son. Despite Baki's numerous attacks, they prove to be futile. All of this is witnessed by Baki's mother, who is happy to see Yuujirou Hanma's smile while the ogre brutally beats her son, leaving him unconscious. Yuri then tries to intervene, but he is stopped by Hanayama, who says that if he tries to interfere, he will end up dead. Finally, Baki's mother realizes her mistake and realizes that she had sent her only son to be killed. Armed with courage, she decides to protect her son, risking her own life. However, her attempt is in vain, as every blow she delivers hurts her, breaking her arms and legs. Then, the ogre brutally attacks her until she is dead, leaving her body lying on the ground on top of her son. All the onlookers watch in terror and horror at the brutality that unfolded before their eyes. However, for the ogre, this is not enough, and he starts attacking and brutally defeating all the present spectators. Afterward, Emi carries her son and, with her last strength, begins to sing him a song as she slowly dies. The young protagonist, trying to deny reality, hallucinates about his mother to have a conversation with her while carrying her on his back. But upon returning to reality, all he has left of her is her ring, which he buries while breaking down in tears in what would become his mother's grave, which he will visit whenever he can. After a long time, we see a grown-up Baki, who is now around 15 years old, and it is clear that he is much stronger now. During this time, Baki has traveled the world in search of stronger opponents. During his journey, he encounters a dog whom he adopts as his pet. It is during this journey that he meets one of the fighters he intended to defeat, who tells him about a place where the world's strongest fighters gather, a clandestine arena. Elsewhere, a man named Tokugawa becomes obsessed with strong individuals and is listening to Baki's story. He is informed that Baki is on his way to meet him. Meanwhile, outside Tokugawa's house, Baki faces all the security guards of the place, defeating them all, including their leader, who was supposed to be a very strong man. In the end, Baki manages to defeat him regardless. Turns out, this man named Tokugawa, just as our protagonist was told, is influential in the world of underground fights and offers Baki his help, introducing him to this world. Sometime later, Baki becomes a champion of underground fights. Meanwhile, Tokugawa is having a meeting with Doppo Orochi, a fighter known as the God of War. Doppo not only has extensive knowledge of Japanese martial arts but also owns several dojos scattered throughout Japan. One of Doppo's many students named Katu also attends this meeting. Katu is also seeking to become one of the strongest individuals in the world. Our protagonist has moved to another rented house and lives a peaceful life, training in that small house. Despite having money, he chooses to live humbly. Elsewhere, Orochi Doppo is having a conversation with Katu, who tries to prove that he is stronger than his master. However, the God of War effortlessly puts young Katu in a difficult situation, demonstrating that despite Katu's strength, he is still no match for his master. After some time, Tokugawa takes Orochi Doppo and Katu to watch the next fight of the champion. Our protagonist is about to face a fighter named Kosho, an expert in karate with a peculiar ability to cut the nerves of his opponents. The fight begins, and the protagonist lands several punches on Kosho's face, demonstrating his superiority in skill in cornering Kosho. However, all of this had been Kosho's strategy. Finally, seeing an opportunity, he uses his cutting technique, managing to reach a nerve in Baki's arm, giving him an advantage in the fight. As the fight progresses, Kosho once again manages to reach Baki and tears the nerve in his right arm. However, Baki starts fighting using his legs, but once again, Kosho catches up to him with his cutting technique and this time severs a nerve in his neck, causing Baki to lose vision in one of his eyes. Kosho takes advantage of this and starts beating Baki. At one point, Kosho reaches another nerve in Baki, this time aiming to blind him. But our protagonist is able to see all of Kosho's movements, and before he can fully blind him, Baki manages to grab his arm. In that moment, our protagonist puts his opponent in an inescapable hold. He is in a perfect position to cause severe and irreversible damage, thus leaving his rival permanently incapacitated. However, Baki ultimately decides not to do it and ends the fight by knocking his opponent unconscious with a single blow. However, victory does not come without consequences, as our protagonist is left completely incapacitated in his arms and with one eye less. Fortunately, in the infirmary, doctors manage to restore the nerves of our protagonist. After this, he has a conversation with Kosho in the infirmary, and they eventually become friends. Upon leaving the infirmary, our protagonist is congratulated by Tokugawa for his victory, and it is at that moment that he meets the God of War, Orochi Doppo, and his student, Kato, who express their eagerness to fight him. Behind them, an old man named Motobi approaches, appearing solely to belittle Baki. The next day, Kiyosumi Katu goes to one of Orochi Doppo's dojos accompanied by his master. Due to the excitement of being able to face Baki, Katu ends up hurting the other students. As for our young Baki, he now attends school, trying to be humble and avoid trouble. However, some bullies attempt to bother him but fail. Just as they were about to intervene, Kozu, our protagonist's love interest, is grabbed by Baki, and he escapes the situation with her. On the other hand, a group of unknown individuals complains about Baki's upcoming opponent, also criticizing the fact that Kosho was allowed to participate. They protest because Motobi is not allowed to face Baki. At that moment, Doppo's student, Katu, accompanied by a professional fighter named Igari, approaches. Meanwhile, in Motobi's dojo, our protagonist realizes that this old man is very strong as his students pose no challenge to him. Even when they all grab him, Motobi easily frees himself from their grip. After witnessing this, our young Baki requests a brief match with Motobi so that his students can learn from his techniques. At first, Motobi is superior, but in the end, the match concludes because the old Motobi had only one goal in mind, and that was to defeat the ogre. As the hours pass, some individuals in school kidnap Kozu in order to get Baki's attention. Baki eventually finds out about this from a friend of Kozu, who tells him everything that happened. When these wrongdoers are about to harm Kozu, Baki arrives to rescue her, humiliating all of them without much trouble. However, Baki does not want Kozu to know that he is the champion of the underground tournament, so he avoids the subject, leaving Kozu without answers about what happened. The next fight for the champion Baki is against the giant Toba, which excites our protagonist as Toba turns out to be Baki's childhood idol. The fight begins, and our young protagonist is subjected to a multitude of blows and kicks from his idol, who does all of this to showcase the strength of professional fighters. Finally, Baki starts fighting back against Motobi, but it is not enough. In a careless moment, Baki receives a massive suplex that leaves him in a bad state. Without giving him any time to recover, the giant attempts to use a technique on Baki to knock him unconscious. However, by biting Toba's arm, Baki manages to free himself and, spitting blood in Toba's face, temporarily blinds him. Despite this, the fight continues, and Baki manages to knock Toba down. However, the giant still manages to stand up. It is then shown that Toba has a knee injury that limits his fighting ability. Nevertheless, this giant still performs powerful suplexes on the protagonist. And even though it seemed like Baki would lose, he keeps getting up again and again, showcasing his charisma and causing Toba to recall memories of his own master. At one point, our protagonist was about to receive another suplex, but Baki managed to avoid it by reversing one of Toba's suplexes, making him realize the injury in his opponent's knee. Baki, seeing this, respects Toba as a warrior, while Doppo explains how incredible it is that the giant has had such a long career despite the knee injury. As a sign of respect, Baki receives Toba's final blows and retaliates with a kick to the knee. The audience, impressed by the display of strength from the fighters, starts cheering for Baki's new victory while also applauding Toba for the incredible fight. After the fight, Toba is taken away, and the doctor tells him that the kick to his knee from Baki was not severe and he will recover soon. As Baki celebrates his victory, the ogre himself, Yuujirou Hanma, appears from among the crowd. Upon seeing this, an angry Baki throws himself at his father to finish him off, but the ogre effortlessly stops him and renders our protagonist unconscious with just one finger. After knocking down the champion, Yuujirou tells Tokugawa that he also wants to be a fighter in the underground matches, and this challenge is accepted by the god of war, Orochi Doppo, who reminds him that they still have unfinished business. It is revealed that one day Yuujirou Hanma went to meet Orochi Doppo, who was drunk and unable to defend himself. The ogre attacked him and left a scar on the face of the god of war. Therefore, the duel between the two fighters is arranged, exciting everyone present. After this, while strolling, Yuujirou arrives at a gym full of boxers and, for his own amusement, decides to give them a humiliating beating. Upon waking up, Baki states that Yuujirou is a threat and that if he had wanted to, he could have killed them all. However, Doppo is not affected by this comment and shows Baki his capabilities, believing he can defeat the ogre. Meanwhile, Motobi intercepts Yuujirou, challenging him to a fight, which Yuujirou accepts. However, the fight does not last long as Yuujirou effortlessly defeats and humiliates the martial artist. Finally, Tokugawa confirms the upcoming fights in the underground arena. The most anticipated match is between the ogre, Yuujirou Hanma, and the god of war, Orochi Doppo. The other fight will be between the champion, Baki Hanma, and Dr. Kureha Shinogi, a renowned but uncertified and experimental physician who has already proven himself quite capable in the field of medicine. This individual is questionable and wants to test his research in the world of combat to prove that his body is exceptional. He tells his brother, who turns out to be Kosho, the same opponent Baki faced before. Finally, the long-awaited day arrives, and the matches begin. First, the fight between the two most anticipated competitors takes place: the ogre, Yuujirou Hanma, and the god of war, Doppo Orochi. At the beginning, the battle seems evenly matched as both fighters showcase their best techniques to each other. However, as the fight progresses, it seems to be turning in favor of the god of war, who manages to gain the upper hand over the ogre. But then, Yuujirou sees that Baki is watching the fight, and he decides to finally take it seriously. He tears off the top part of his clothing, leaving everyone present stunned as they witness the demon-like face on the back of Yuujirou Hanma, finally seeing the true form of the strongest creature on Earth. This is the being who has defeated entire armies single-handedly without using any weapons. Yuujirou, now out of control, starts attacking Doppo, who begins to feel cornered by the clear superiority of the ogre. Yuujirou relentlessly pushes Doppo to the ropes, attacking him like a beast attacking its prey, ready to kill. However, despite knowing all of this, Orochi Doppo refuses to give up and continues to fight against the ogre until the last second. When it seems like he has lost, Doppo manages to rise again with sheer willpower. In response, the ogre gouges out one of his eyes and proceeds to deliver the final blow, an attack that pierces his heart, ending the life of the god of war. Baki is left completely horrified as he witnesses his father once again take the life of one of his friends. After the fight, the doctors try everything possible to save Doppo, but the outcome is inevitable. Orochi's life has come to an end. Everyone around mourns this great loss. But at that moment, to everyone's surprise, Dr. Kureha would appear, demonstrating his great physical and medical abilities. He would start putting his hand inside Orochi Doppo's chest, without spilling a single drop of blood. Kureha would start massaging Doppo's heart, and miraculously his pulse and heartbeat began to return. After this, the fight between Dr. Kureha and champion Baki Hanma would finally continue. This egocentric doctor believed he had the most perfect body of all and started showcasing various demonstrations. For example, he showed the power of his lungs by inflating and bursting a balloon with a single breath, or stretching a tire until it split in two. While all this spectacle was happening, Baki would arrive at the arena, seeming completely unmotivated due to what he had just witnessed, and his face showed that he had lost all desire to fight. Then, in a flashback, we would see a man in a suit trying to convince him to return to the fight, and another man would lead Baki to a girl in a wheelchair. It turns out she was one of Kureha's patients in the past. This despicable man took advantage of his patients, playing with their desires to move forward and making them believe he could work miracles with his surgeries, only for it to have negative effects on their bodies. Upon hearing this story, Baki's fighting spirit would return as he shouted in anger. Back in the fight, before it even began, Katu would call Baki an idiot for not even warming up before the fight. When he touches Baki's body, he gets burned, realizing that Baki's body was boiling with rage. Then the fight would start, and Baki would throw himself with all his might against the doctor, not giving him a chance to breathe. Finally, Baki would manage to knock him down, making Katu and Motobi wonder if Baki had already won. However, Kureha's brother would respond that hell had only just begun. Then Dr. Kureha would start getting back on his feet, and this despicable individual, after getting up as if nothing happened, starts mocking his patients upon realizing that Baki had heard their stories. He would shout at them, saying they should be grateful for being experimented on. Seeing that this man had no regard for others' pain, Baki would make it his mission to teach him a lesson. Both of them would exchange solid blows, but then this despicable individual starts using all the gathered information to hit Baki more effectively in his vital points. The damage Baki receives is enormous, and eventually, the pain from these blows becomes so intense that he is knocked out. In the dressing room, a military friend of Yuujirou Hanma would tell the ogre that Doppo had come back to life, surprising him and asking how Orochi Doppo managed to deceive death. But the military man would tell him that it was all the doing of Dr. Kureha, who was currently fighting against Baki, catching the attention of the ogre, who says he wants to see that man. Meanwhile, our protagonist would barely manage to stand up with great effort, as his brain had been cruelly damaged, but he still wanted to continue the fight. Seeing this, Kureha would hit him forcefully and effectively with a technique that internally damaged Baki's entire body, while Motobi explained how complicated this technique Kureha had just used was, and Kosho would respond that thanks to the various surgeries Kureha had performed throughout his life, he had been able to learn the workings of the human body and master this technique on his own. Dr. Kureha, having left the champion lying on the ground, with his ego so high, would dare to challenge the ogre, Yuujirou Hanma. Everyone present is surprised to see the ogre among the audience as no one noticed when he appeared there. Dr. Kureha would tell him that if he was interested in him, he should come down and fight. This comment would annoy the ogre, who would jump down into the arena, and Kureha would start threatening him. However, Yuujirou would only mock the doctor. When they were about to start their fight, Baki would stop them, barely standing up and telling Yuujirou to leave because his fight was not over yet. Kureha would ask if Baki really planned to fight in that condition, to which Baki would respond affirmatively. But then, from the audience, the girl in the wheelchair would shout, telling Baki that he didn't need to put himself in danger just for them. Baki would correct her, saying not to get the wrong idea, that he was only fighting for himself, and stating that Kureha was just a stepping stone to reach Yuujirou. This comment would infuriate Kureha, who would sarcastically mock Baki. Then, Yuujirou would tell the doctor that he was about to lose that fight, surprising Kureha. Yuujirou would add that it would be over with a single blow. Kureha would congratulate Baki due to the faith his father had in him but didn't believe it was possible for our protagonist to defeat him. Baki would tell him that maybe not due to the condition of his right arm, but he could still use a technique with his left arm. Kureha would ask why he saved that technique for the end, and Baki would respond that he was saving it for his reunion with Yuujirou Hanma. Hearing this, Kureha would say that Baki should be more careful. Then, both would prepare for this final technique, with Kureha assuming a defensive posture to cover his face, believing that his abs would be able to withstand any attack. On the other hand, Baki would launch his most powerful attack, a punch that would directly hit the doctor's abdomen, surprising him with the strength of this attack, as well as the rest of the audience. Then, Dr. Kureha would fall unconscious to the ground, further astonishing everyone present. Finally, the fight would end, and Baki would have successfully defended his championship title. Koto and Kosho would ask Motobi what had happened, and he would explain that Baki used an attack called Gotai Jutsu, a technique that strengthens all the muscles in the body so that at the right moment and with the correct timing, one can put all the force of their body into their fist, delivering a powerful and accurate blow. After the match, we would see in the infirmary how Kureha would be held by several of Tokugawa's employees, who could barely contain him. Due to the blow delivered by Baki, Kureha would be lying on a stretcher screaming in pain and writhing, while the doctor explained that the pain in his stomach caused by the blow was infernal. After freeing himself from the people who were holding him, Kureha would start writhing in pain on the floor. Outside this hospital room, Kosho and Baki would talk about what had happened, and Kosho would tell Baki that Kureha had been diagnosed and apparently needed an operation. Baki would respond that he had hit him with that intention. Kosho would agree, saying that Baki was right and that no one had the right to criticize him. But then, Kureha's patients would start arriving, those who had been victims of his experiments, and Baki would show them how Kureha ended up after the fight. One of them would say that it had been enough, but Baki would respond that they should be enjoying this. This comment would anger Kosho, who would get ready to attack our protagonist. However, this whole situation would be interrupted by the doctor, who would shout that they needed a type AB blood donor. After a few seconds of silence, the girl in the wheelchair would gather all her strength and stand up, saying that after Kureha's surgery, a part of her heart had given up, which was why she couldn't stand up. Then the arena doctor would say that a patient doesn't heal because of the doctor's abilities, but because of their own desire to heal, and if a patient doesn't want to get better, even the best doctor can't cure them. Back at Baki's house, he would tell Kozu that he was leaving and ask if she could take care of the dog for a while. She would say there was no problem but ask him where he was going. Baki would say it wasn't anything important and that he would be gone for a couple of days, then he would run away from the place. We would then see our protagonist running around until finally reaching a large tree, where he would say he had come to find himself. He would then sit at the base of that tree and start meditating. And that's how the first season of this anime ends. If you've reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you've been one of the few people to make it this far. So comment the word Baki in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.